Hello. So I was thinking the other day, um, here was my first piece of knitting. It's actually pretty uniform. There's only a couple like little loopy spots in it. Can you even see? You can't really tell. Versus the crazy knitting. There's a couple holes in there because I dropped some stitches, and then you see that I managed to pick some stitches up too. And so I also did some crocheting with my other hand, and this is what it looked like with that too. It's actually not as bad as the knitting. The knitting was much better, or was much worse. Like this was the crocheting, but I also did practice the knitting before I started crocheting just to get my hands down. And then after I finally like got it down, this is what my crocheting ended up looking at. Like it looks like I crocheted it with my real hand. I did not. It was much slower to crochet this with my hands. And then did I knit a piece? I did knit one too. So here is what yarn's going everywhere. Here's what my knitting looked like, much better than the first attempt with my random hands. So I wanted to show you what it actually looks like when you hold the yarn in your other hand, because it might work for you. It did not work for me. Yeah, so here we go. So here is the crocheting. I'm going to use the terrible piece of what it looks like up close, not looking so hot. I mean, I am pretty impressed with this little swatchy swatch here. It looks more like my normal crochet. But I was thinking like how to show, like when you're learning new things, how hard it is to learn a new thing when you're not used to doing things with your hands. So the trick here for me was figuring out my tension. Like I don't really hold my yarn in my other hand so much. And since like I like movement to be as fluid as possible with the least amount of movement, this was very difficult for me. So like here's what it looks like. And then here's my working yarn, and I yarn over and I pull through. So now I have 2 stitches on here. This is really tight for me because I'm holding this yarn really tight, and then I'm yarning over and I'm pulling through. That's how this is, and this is how I do it, trying to be as seamless as possible. Now, you might not get this as easy as I did, probably because this is how I prefer to knit and crochet, with my hands like doing as little movement as possible. But what you might end up doing is this. You'll put the hook in, you'll yarn over, you'll pull the hook through, hold it, you'll yarn over, pull the hook through into the stitch, yarn over, put the stitch through, hook through, yarn over, pull it through. But you see how crazy this looks, like yarning over and then pulling the hook back again. You're constantly like letting go of the hook so you can yarn over. And that's the movement that I think a lot of people have a hard time with, is how do you work the hook and the yarn at the same time so you're not constantly letting go of this hook and then yarning over. Did you see how that worked? So here's the hook in the work, yarning over and then pulling through. That's very cumbersome because you've got so many things going on. You've got to let go of the hook, you got to yarn over, you got to pull through the hook. So this stitch was really tight, you can tell. I told you I was crocheting really tight on this. Okay, so now this is how I've tensioned this, because I was having a hard time holding onto this yarn and keeping a fluid motion. I wrapped the yarn around my middle finger and like did a figure 8 with my index finger, and then the rest of the working yarn is here in the hand. Some people wrap it around their pinky and then hold the yarn and then use their index finger as the lever point. I had found that I could not, I didn't get enough, I couldn't get my tension right. Things were a little crazy. So now, and then I figured out how to hold this much better, so I had as little movement as possible. So I found that if like I stick the hook in here, it was much easier. And see, now I can hold the hook like this, like a kind of like how a pencil. So I use the pencil grip here, and this might work for you. So here in there, the yarn over. It doesn't, see, it's not working very well. Yarn over, put through, yarn over, put through, yarn over. Yarn over. I show this to you guys because I want you to know that, like, I struggle learning new things too. And I know that I already know how to crochet, so that's like one step closer to figuring out the mechanics of this. But I wanted you to see, like, I'm struggling as well, trying to learn how to do this with my hands. But I don't want you to be discouraged. I know that it is frustrating learning a new skill, and it is a skill. While it's, you know, a lot of people think it's crafty and all that, you know, what crocheting and knitting do for your hands and for your mind and your body is that it builds dexterity, but you don't realize. It also gives me massive carpal tunnel, because sometimes my wrists hurt, according to the chiropractor, but who cares about them? So now, here we're at the end of the row, and we're yarning over. And so there's that row. I think I did a couple half doubles right there. There's a lot of stitches right there. Okay, and then, so I'm going to show you what my knitting looks like. So now I knit continental style, and this is pretty much English throwing, so because you're throwing the needle, but I'm going to try to do a kind of continental. I also had to figure out how to hold this and work the needles at the same time. Yarn. This was really difficult. So here's in there, yarn over, and you'll see that this movement is very similar to like the crocheting. It's just with 2 needles, you know. You're creating an interlocking fabric by using these knots and stitches, and it's just a different way to do it with than with a hook. So you can tell, like, this is difficult for me. I'm like having a sheesh of a time here. But there's a yarn over. He's still in the yarn over knitting too. So this is what I ended up finding that worked for me the best. So I had to stick the needle in, yarn over, whoop, got a little wobbly there, yarn over, and then pull it through. This is what I did not like about English knitting, English style knitting, is this constant yarning over. See how that works? So it's interesting. Now I can do this faster now because I got this movement, and I figured out how to hold my yarn for the best benefit for yarning over. Let's go back to crocheting. Okay, so here is my beautiful blue swatch, and so you could also, like I said, if you yarned over like this, yarn over like that, or if you use your other hand, need more yarn here, and what makes it easier is if you're holding your work, you know. So if you have to let go of the hook to yarn over, you're holding your hook in your hand, and then holding the work in the other hand, and then yarning over. Oh, this is where turning your hook works for carrying the yarn through. This is getting a little crazy. There, see? Yarning over. Yeah. Get a little violent here. That's what it feels like. How did I do that with my middle finger before? I don't know, but that seemed pretty cool. All right, so I wrapped it. I was doing something that was easy when I was knitting. So you can see, like, learning a new technique is still difficult. It's a concerted effort, and that's what's so frustrating, I think, when beginners start to learn, because it's taking so much effort to get it to do what you want it to do. And you know, it's practice. I've been doing this a long time. I'm also just naturally adept at being crafty. Like, I like using my hands for a lot of things. You know, I use pastels with my fingers. I'm very in-depth with my fingers, and charcoal drawings with my fingers, you know, blending and stuff. I just appreciate working with my hands a lot. And so because of that, I think my hands are like, yes, we want to do this. Show us how. So this is really hard for me. And you can tell, like, I'm having a hard time here holding the yarn. Like, this is super frustrating, but I wanted to show you because I don't want you to get frustrated over this. You might have to just set it down for a day or so and then come back to it and regroup, you know, and look at what you're doing and see, like, your different, you know, what your work likes over time. I can tell you, like, my crocheting looked horrendous in the beginning, and it was just awful. I mean, I did learn when I was a kid, but when I started up again as an adult, things were kind of just not fabulous. So, you see that? Like, they're not all that fabulous. They're just not. And it's okay. Oh, yeah. And then here's my, this piece of knitting. It's 10 years old. You know, there's twisted stitches. I'm not quite sure what happened there. You know, I'm not, like, here. Twisted stitches. Yarn's all pulled out. And I'm very proud of this piece of knitting. This is my first piece of swatch knitting where I learned how to knit and purl. I hope you guys keep your first piece too, just as a reminder of how far you've come. So, thanks for joining me on my journey of knitting and crocheting and working with my hands. I hope you enjoyed it.